Well, where you are today is at William Head Minimum Security Federal Penitentiary. 100 years ago, standing here, it would have been the William Head Quarantine Station. And that was the arrival spot for the Chinese Labor Corps that was on their way to France. What you see out here is what's left of the pilings from the quarantine station. The dock itself went from this point straight to this building here. That was the fumigation unit. It actually had large fumigation chambers in it. At the point, there were bathrooms where passengers would be taken off. They would be medically inspected. They would be deloused. They would be fumigated, I guess. The Chinese Labor Corps was put together between the British and the French. They looked around the world for a labor corps that they could bring to France. At that point in the war, things were not going well for the Allies. They had suffered a number of major setbacks. The British themselves recruited and moved 80,000 Chinese laborers, and they moved them across Canada. The French took an additional 40,000 and they moved them by ship, mostly through the Suez Canal, up into France that way. The effort itself was secret because the Canadian and the British and the French governments didn't want the Germans to know that these individuals were coming to the conflict. These young men came out of the Shandong province in China, and that part of China was very economically depressed. These people were not just looking for this adventure. The money was needed. This was an opportunity. These people were generally young. When you look at their faces, they're young and they're vigorous. They're about to go on the adventure of their life. They were getting something out of this. There were some that lost their lives in transit and are still buried at William Head here. This is a CLC. This is a CLC. This one here and that one there, one over there. So there's 5 right here that we can pretty well confirm. But when you look around, there's many other graves here that are not identified. And so more research has to be done to really identify or really determine whether there are other CLC members in this cemetery. When you go and look at these grave sites, you have a marker here that has individual names on it and a number. And I'm not sure if that was the CLC number. The CLC themselves actually had a brass bracelet that it was riveted to their arm. The first ones in particular had that on it, and it had a number on it. And they were often referred to by their number, not their name. They have crosses over the graves, and we've been working with the Commonwealth War Memorial Society to have them come and confirm their identity and properly memorialize them, to actually put a headstone that gives their name, gives their number, and a reference to their contribution to the war. This little knot of soldiers, it's a punishment detail. And they've moved this man into the center of that area, and you can see the ghosted figure of a soldier whipping him. The play is called Here, and it is about the history of William Head.
Back to work. This wall's not going to build itself.
We got that image from a picture. And the picture comes from a number of shots that happened at that time in 1917 when the Chinese Labor Corps were here in William Head. And there were a number of whipping scenes. And they were very visceral and very powerful for us as a sort of commentary on a lot of things.
Where's this?
This photograph was taken exactly where we're standing. And you'll look, there's probably 8,000 or 10,000 men here. In the front you have Canadian and British soldiers on horses. In the background, all this white, those are army bell tents. These are the men that have now arrived from China, and the logistics of moving them across Canada have begun. The laborers themselves were transported with a railway service guard that was aboard the trains. The trains themselves were locked, essentially nailed shut, so individuals couldn't get out. And the time of year that they were being moved and the cramped conditions of that travel, a number of them actually froze to death in some of these cars. The idea was if this labor force could come to France, then the French nationals could put down their tools and join the conflict. They weren't recruited as soldiers. The reality of the situation was they moved them wherever they needed them. They were on the docks, unloading ships and unloading materials that were required for the war. They built roads, they built railways. They were in factories throughout France. The other reality of the situation, as they built these roads into the conflict areas, they were filled with these Chinese laborers. They went to where the fight was, so they were put on the front lines building trenches on the front lines with a shovel rather than a gun. And again, you can imagine just how dangerous that was. They're also interested in putting a memorial somewhere in the institution, whether it be in the cemetery or outside of the gates of the institution. It's problematic having a memorial inside a prison. It's not as public as you would want. So there is lots of discussion about how this can be best done.